Good morning, everyone, and welcome along to our post-election How to Manage Employment Law Change webinar. I'm Michael. I'm going to be your host for this morning's session. Just before we do get started, we'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. So, your microphone will be muted automatically this morning, so you don't need a microphone for this session. But if you do have any questions for myself or the panel today, then you can submit those by clicking the little speech bubble icon on your taskbar down the right-hand side. It'll expand your panel. You have access to the box in the bottom right-hand corner there. That'll be available throughout. A couple of handouts for you today as well. Do take the opportunity to download those during the session. Again, you've just got that little icon on the your taskbar. Give it a click. Those will be available throughout the session for you to download. There's also an option to switch to full screen mode, which you can do again throughout the session if required. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer just before we start there. The content we'll be covering today is based on the recently published manifestos for the parties concerned. And until we know the outcome of the general election and the elected party have put legislation in place, we can't know all of the details. So the purpose of this session today is to provide you with an early high-level view of potential outcomes and considerations, just to give you a head start on any planning you may need to do in readiness. I'm also joined today by Advisor Plus HR business partner Jane Bradshaw-Jones and a colleague HR technical consultant Hayley Saunders, to share their extensive employment law expertise and use their unerring ability to convert complicated legal speak to easily understood business speak. Jane, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
And Hayley?
Hi, everyone. I'm also delighted to welcome Peter Dart, who is Head of People for Retail at Ellis Brigham. We're really pleased that he's here with us today to share his thoughts as well. Peter, would you like to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Right, now it's been a busy year so far in the world of employment law, with new laws coming in thick and fast and more landing later this year. And with the local elections giving us a strong indicator of a new Labour government on the horizon and the general election set to take place on the 4th of July, it looks like there'll be a whole host more changes that would impact your business. Labour announced its Green Paper, and more recently Plan to Make Work Pay, which promises a wide range of employment law changes within the first 100 days of coming into power. Businesses will need to be up to speed quickly with the proposed changes. So with our usual solution-focused proactive approach, and always with the aim of simplifying HR, we're here to help you prepare early for the impact of these possible changes and what you'll need to do to get ahead should these changes be implemented. We'll make sure that at the end of the webinar, you can access the slides we've used. Those are available to download via the handouts icon. So that'll be available throughout the webinar. And we'll share the webinar recording as well. That will come on a follow-up email shortly after the webinar once we finish. So you can watch back the on-demand content and share links to the portal of policies and areas you may need to pay particular attention to. So there's an additional handout there as well. And that will hopefully help to make your business ready for any upcoming changes that may be inevitable. We'll share more on how to access these at the end of the session, just to remind you that they are there. So between the four of us, we're going to give you a clear and concise summary of the need to know detail and the practical impact of the changes so that you're all set for the changes which may follow. There's a lot for us to get through, so we'll get going. And just before we do get going, just a reminder, we had scheduled this session originally I think it was scheduled for about 60 minutes. So we're thinking probably around about the half-hour mark. Right, Jane, before we get to the main bulk of the session, do you want to give us a quick headline summary of what changes are being proposed?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Michael. So at a high level, the most impactful key changes they are proposing are making unfair dismissal a day one right, moving towards a single status of worker, a new right to disconnect or switch off from work so that employees aren't contacted outside of their working hours, ending one-sided flexibility and banning exploitative zero-hour contracts, and also eradicating qualifying periods for sick pay and parental leave, and also a true living wage for all.
Wow, so a lot of potential changes on the horizon. Let's tackle each of them in turn, kicking off with making unfair dismissal a day one right. So what will that mean in practice?
Well, this one is making quite the headlines. So at the moment, employees need 2 years service in order to bring an ordinary unfair dismissal claim. Labour is proposing to reduce this. And although there's a lot of focus on this becoming a day one right, that is a little misleading. What they've actually said is that it's subject to contractual probationary periods. So that means that employees will achieve the right to bring an unfair dismissal claim, but after they've passed the probationary period that's set out in their contract. This may result in businesses introducing long probationary periods or continually extending the probationary period in order to eke out the period where the employee is unable to claim unfair dismissal. It could also discourage some employers from taking on new workers and even perhaps putting up with underperformers, or it may encourage them to offer more self-employed contracts. I see a number of challenges with this practically. Firstly, employment contracts aren't always drafted well enough to ensure that it's clear what the probation period actually is and whether there's the right to extend it. So the starting point for employers will have to be a review of their employment contracts. We suggest bumping this to the top of your to-do list as a priority. The reality is that it will only impact future hires, so getting good, clear clauses in place now is going to be key. And then if I had a pound for the number of times we've had clients tell us that they've forgotten to do probation reviews for some of their employees, I would be a millionaire by now. So that creates a big issue with proving at what point the employee's right to unfair dismissal actually kicks in, and means employees will have to have much better processes to ensure that probation periods are not missed and that managers are trained to understand their importance.
Yeah, business owners have so much on their plate at the moment. Now, got a few stats for everyone. Gartner reported that 75% of business managers are overwhelmed by the growth of their job responsibilities, and 73% aren't equipped to lead organizational change. And then in addition, 82% of HR leaders interviewed for the study, they said that they didn't feel that managers are currently equipped to lead the change. So Peter, how are managers going to react to dealing with what they perceive as more work and responsibilities in their role?
Well, I think that employers that have been operating along best practice lines won't see such a significant change. For example, we tend to follow the same procedure for employees under 2 years as those over 2 years, especially where employees have protected characteristics, for example. Probation reviews do get missed from time to time, and that will become more important as there's lack of clarity on those, precise 2-year mark. This may lead to managers extending probation as far as their policies allow, or in some organizations, perhaps introducing lengthy probations from the outset. You may also see organizations putting up with underperformers, potentially lowering productivity, and yet others may offer temporary contracts or part-time to begin with in an attempt to mitigate risk. And this may result in missing out on recruiting great candidates or lower engagement and higher employee turnover as a result.
Thanks, Peter. Right, let's move on to another big headline which is being proposed, and it's the move towards single status worker. Jane, can you explain what this means?
Yeah, so there's very little detail on this at the moment, but Labour have made it clear that they believe that the current 3-tier employment system really fails to make it clear for both businesses and workers what their rights and protections are. With the rise of technology and different ways of working, Labour believe that an essential change is needed and want to move towards a single status employer and move towards a simpler framework which will clearly define what a worker is versus someone who is self-employed. Alongside this, Labour pledged to support and champion self-employed workers and strengthen their rights and protections too.
Thanks, Jane. And moving on to another big change, the new right to disconnect and switch off from work. Hayley, do you want to take us through what this will mean in practice?
Yes, so this is based around work-life balance. So the idea is that employees will have the right to switch off from work outside of the hours that they're contracted to work. That literally means that as their employer, you cannot contact them outside of their working hours. So although this is a new concept in UK law, it is already happening in other countries such as France. It will be interesting to see how this will actually work in practice, as many in salaried roles already have an obligation in their contracts to perform additional hours outside of their usual contracted hours in order to get the work completed. If there's an acquisition, a particularly challenging period, or a business opportunity to seize, that can obviously often mean working around the clock to get it done. Labour have, however, recognised this and have softened the language from the original Green Paper pledge, and recognises that workers and employers should work together on bespoke policies and contractual terms. So employees should reflect now on their working practices and what potential changes can be tabled should this come into effect. So what are your thoughts, Peter?
Well, I see significant challenges for this in an organisation like ours. In retail, store hours fall outside of regular office hours, but oftentimes stores may need operational support then. Then there's things like alarm call-outs in the night for store managers. I like what Labour are trying to do here, but the implementation may be tricky for organisations like Ellis Brigham. I think culture's key here. Some organisations may just pay this lip service. Others may find themselves significantly constrained by following the letter of the law. It could also impact the benefits of increased flexibility that so many people have enjoyed since the pandemic.
So it sounds like it's going to be really difficult for some businesses. Work-life balance has quite rightly become more important in the workplace, and I think that's entirely correct. But as you say, there are always going to be those circumstances in some businesses or roles where employers would have to manage this very carefully if it came into practice. So working through the other key changes, introducing a ban on 0 hours contracts, coming back to you, Peter, how do you think this might impact your business if it's introduced?
Well, I'm conflicted on this one. 0 hours have a bad reputation from some really unscrupulous employers, and I agree something should be done to prevent that kind of practice. On the other hand, we use 0 hours contracts where it suits both parties, and that works really well for us. We don't insist on them or offer 0 hours as standard. And where employees are working regular hours, managers should change those contracts to reflect that. I think the British Retail Consortium has raised concerns about this, asking for some flexibility as opposed to banning them outright, and that feels about right to me. You could see some unscrupulous employers offering just 1 hour contracts or hiring people on a contract basis, in which case the ban won't achieve what it sets out to do.
And Jane, how can businesses who rely heavily on 0 hour contracts best prepare for a rapid change here?
Thank you, Michael. Well, Labour have made it really clear that the ban will only apply to exploitative 0 hour contracts rather than every 0 hour contracts. Labour are really keen to ensure that workers have security in their working lives, so that's why they've taken that stance. Labour also want individuals who are working regular hours for 12 weeks or more to have the right to a regular contract to reflect those hours which are usually worked. As ever, it remains to be seen what will amount to regular hours over that 12-week period, but employers will want to start looking at how they're resourced so they're not heavily reliant on the same workers picking up any flexible hours. They will also want to consider whether they have the right systems in place to be able to regularly review the hours that are being worked by 0 hours workers. Doing this will help them spot when somebody might be getting to the stage of performing regular hours. So from a practical perspective, reviewing the use of 0 hours contracts across a business is a good habit to get into, regardless of whether this becomes a legal requirement or not. As Peter said, while some 0 hour contracts do have some advantages, they can also create challenges for businesses as well. So supporting managers to be able to identify how best service work is key so that the contracts issued accurately reflect working practices. In addition to this, if you're able to offer guaranteed hours, this could help drive engagement and also retention as well.
Thanks, Jane. And Hayley, there are a few other changes mentioned. Can you summarise those for us too?
Yeah, of course. So some of the other key changes which have been proposed are improving the tribunal system. So by digitalising them to help reduce the backlog, They also want to increase the time limit to bring an employment claim from 3 months to 6 months. This will allow more time for internal procedures to be carried out with the objective to reduce the number of claims going forward to tribunal. We also have the eradicating qualifying periods for sick pay. So Labour is proposing to scrap the qualifying period, which currently relies on 3 waiting days before SSP kicks in. This is likely to be a significant additional cost to employers and will make proactively managing sickness absence, including the infrequent one-off days, a high priority for businesses, especially because they're proposing to increase the amount payable for SSP as well. And the lower earnings limit will also be removed as well. And in keeping with proposing to scrap qualifying periods, they're saying that parental leave, such as maternity and shared parental leave, should also become a day one right as well.
Thanks, Hayley. Your point on proactively managing sickness absence is so important for many reasons. We've seen incredible benefits delivered in terms of improved employee experiences and significant cost savings through proactive sickness management. When managers are empowered to give the right support at the right time, our customers have seen a 10% reduction in sickness absence rates, which will be even more impactful if qualifying periods are removed. Peter, do you think scrapping the qualifying period for SSP would make a difference to sickness levels in your business?
I do. I worry one-off sick days will increase, and that will be difficult to manage, even with robust absence management procedures in place. Overall, I'm in favour of SSP from day one if it minimises presenteeism and the transmission of sickness. Hopefully, the administrative and financial burden of this for businesses like ours will be offset with the proposed changes to the business rates.
Thanks, Peter. Right, now we spent a majority of time talking about should Labour win the general election. However, we also need to consider if Conservatives win and remain in power. Jane, can you talk about what this would mean for businesses and employee rights?
Yes, absolutely. So the Conservative manifesto was published a couple of weeks ago now, and it has minimal information on any proposed changes to employment law, but there are a couple of key areas to highlight. However, it's important to note that these are not new pledges. So the first area is around the plan to overhaul the FitNote system. So again, there's limited information on this, but the plan is to move away from obtaining a FitNote from a GP and instead introducing work and health professionals. And these work and health professionals will have the time to fully assess somebody's ability to work. The second is to continue with the implementation of minimum service level agreements during periods of industrial action. So this was passed in 2023 to ensure that the public can continue to access services that they rely on during strike action. There is also a reference to updating the Equality Act in relation to the sex and gender definition, but we await further details on this. Although absent from the manifesto, it is likely that reforms to TUPE and non-compete clauses will continue to be implemented if the Conservatives remain in power. I just want to also take the time as well to summarise the relevant sections of the manifestos from the Liberal Democrats and also the Reform Party as well. So the Liberal Democrats manifesto outlines key pledges on employment law, including expanding family-friendly rights and who they apply to, extending the right to parental leave to self-employed parents, increasing the length of paternity leave, and they also plan to introduce paid carers leave. So that is currently unpaid, but they want to ensure that that is paid should they come to power. The Lib Dems also want to create a new dependent contractor employment status, and that will sit between employment and self-employment. And with the new status also comes entitlements to basic rights such as sick pay and holiday entitlement. They want to introduce a higher minimum wage for people on 0-hour contracts and give agency workers the right to request a fixed hours contract after 12 months. They also want to revamp statutory sick pay, or SSP as it's also known, by removing the current lower earnings limit and making it available from day one so that all workers can benefit. They also hope to align the rate of SSP with the national minimum wage and propose to support small employers with these new costs. Moving on to the Reform Party, so rather than call it a manifesto, they've issued a contract, and like the Conservative Party manifesto, it is really light on detail. However, some proposals are to abolish the IR35 rules to help support sole traders. A general pledge to scrap thousands of laws that they believe hold British businesses back. However, it's really not clear what laws they're referring to. A promise to replace the Equality Act, but again, it's not clear what this will be replaced with. And then also a pledge to scrap all EU regulations with immediate effect. However, British employment laws are based on EU regulations, so yet again, unsure of the detail on this. So, Michael, lots to digest at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, lots to think about and plan for. Now, whilst we don't know what the outcome of the general election will be and how much these proposals will actually be progressed, it's best to prepare for them early on and make sure you have the systems, processes and policies in place to be able to get ahead if they do. Jane, Hayley and Peter, thanks so much for breaking it all down so clearly and sharing your practical insight. Now, if anyone has any questions, you do have an opportunity to submit those. So if you weren't quite with us at the beginning of the session, all you need to do to submit your questions, and we've had quite a few already, all you need to do, click the little icon on your taskbar down the right. It's the one that looks like the speech bubble. You'll have access to the little panel in the bottom corner. Pop in your question, your comments, click send, and we'll try and pick some of them up. So we've already had a few questions come through, so we'll try and pick up some of the common themes from those questions. So let's tackle a few of these together. This one is in relation to unfair dismissal unfair dismissal being a day one right. Is there a time limit on how long you could make a probationary period? So Hayley, do you want to pick this one up?
Yeah, so at present there isn't, but Labour could introduce a cap. Even if they don't, you've got to balance the length of a probation period with your commercial and operational needs too. So let's be honest, having an extra long probationary period isn't exactly going to entice the best talent, and it also becomes difficult to manage. We suspect, however, we will see a move to 6-month probationary periods with the right to extend by a further 6 months becoming the norm.
Great. The next question we have is it's about SSP changes. So can you change any contractual sick pay you currently offer if the cost of SSP increases and the qualifying period is scrapped? Jane, over to you on that employment law query.
Thank you. So it really depends on what your employment contracts and policies currently say. So ultimately, if you're looking to take something away that you currently contractually offer, there are formal processes that you need to follow. So starting those processes at a later date will be more challenging, especially if you're doing it at the same time as the unfair dismissal being a day one right. This could mean that more employees could challenge the changes you're wanting to implement. So it is worth reviewing your contracts and policies now to ensure that you have the flexibility you need built in readiness for the proposed changes. So waiting until it becomes law will make negotiating any changes much more difficult, with employees defaulting back to whatever the legal position will be at that time.
Great. Our third question, common theme on this one as well. SMEs are already stretched, so with the potential for significantly more unfair dismissal cases being raised with the day one right, how do we prepare for the increase in workload? Hayley.
Okay, so as we touched upon earlier, ensuring that you have clear processes that managers can confidently and competently follow will reduce the risk of poor process management, contributing to more claims being upheld. With the burden of proof in unfair dismissal claims resting on employers, ensuring consistent and fair processes are followed and can be evident will be even more important than ever. So, Peter, is there anything you'd like to add on how businesses like yours in particular need to prepare for the potential increase in cases?
I mean, I'd agree with you totally there. I think the key thing is deal with capability issues early and feedback on progress regularly. Document any capability or conduct issues from the outset, ideally long before any decisions on dismissal have been made. I think if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. And no employee should have dismissal come as a surprise to them. Finally, I'd always contact the Sage Advice helpline and log a case in all but the simplest cases. For me, I've found that really helps to have someone just sense check what you're doing and offer advice. I think especially in small organizations where you might not have colleagues around you, that can be really, really helpful to have that, to have that support there.
Brilliant, thank you, Peter. And that covers all the potential changes that we want to take you through today. We've had what seems like years without many employment law changes, and now they're all coming along at once. We hope you found it valuable, the session today, and apologies if we weren't able to cover off your questions. We will follow up with you personally after this session, and you will receive an email where we'll share a link to you with a list of questions from today's session. So Jane, Hayley, Peter, thank you for all the insight and practical guidance today. As we've touched on, these changes will require updates and amendments to your existing people documents and templates, as well as new documents to be introduced. And a few things before we finish, if I can find the right slide this time. As well as the handout with the slides we've taken you through today, we've also got a couple of additional useful documents. So again, do take that opportunity to download them while we're on, and hopefully they'll help to get you prepared. You can download those now. We'll try and include a link on the follow-up email as well. If you'd like our help with anything we've covered, please feel free to check out any of the topics covered in the Sage HR advice portal. Alternatively, if you're a professional or premium customer, please do not hesitate to call the advice line, where one of our consultants will happily provide any guidance on any of the topics covered today. Just to let you know, Sage HR Advice is here to help you to navigate and simplify these proposed changes. And alongside Sage HR, you can automate and simplify tasks, calculate holiday entitlement, arrange shift scheduling based on people's contracted hours, and automatically logged hours worked as well. And lastly, we do run regular webinars each week on Sage 50 Payroll and accounts. This month, we're running our pensions webinar series with 3 webinars coming up. If you'd like, if you are interested, you can sign up at sage.co.uk/webinars. If you'd also like more information or a free demo of Sage HR software, the information will be included in the follow-up email with details of how you can get in touch. And with that, that brings us to a close for today's session. Thank you again for everyone joining us today, and we hope to see you on some more webinars soon. Many thanks.